Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Matthew Woods, host of Leading Out of the Woods, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, EduMagicians, and welcome back to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and if you're a student teacher, you're going to want to turn up the volume, get out your notebook, and start taking notes. Today, I have a special guest with me, and we are sharing all about how student teachers can step out beyond the classroom. We know your lives are busy inside the classroom, but we're going to talk about how we can step out beyond the classroom to get involved with our students' lives and to really make the most out of our student teaching experience. Today I have with me Chrissy, and she's going to be sharing all kinds of tips. We have 4 main tips that we're going to also add in some sprinkles to with more information. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for stopping by, Chrissy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about your teaching journey, what brought you into education, and what your current role is?
Sure. Well, what brought me into education started in the 4th grade. it was a love of writing little sticky notes about whenever I wrote a little book for my teacher, she would write a little note for me on a sticky note and stick it on my book. And I think that was what solidified my love of teaching. It was really my love of office supplies. But since then, obviously I've grown. And I started out as a 4th grade teacher, and I taught 4th grade and then 3rd grade for 9 years. And then I became an instructional coach. So on a campus, I was a coach for 5 years. And then whenever my kids were born, I had been building a side business for years, providing resources for teachers and coaches. And so then whenever my kids were born, I was ready to make the leap and do that as, full-time, which is really part-time when you work from home with kids as,
Yes.
the real boss. So that was whenever I started to provide even more support to instructional coaches and teachers through professional development, coaching, and resources. So that's what I do now. I work with people mostly virtually because my kids are little, but as I get older, I'm excited to get back and do more in-person work with schools in my area and across the country. So I'm looking forward to that. But for now, buzzingwithmissb.com, my blog has been around for years, and the older posts are about teaching because that's where I started.
Mm-hmm. And that's how we met over on Instagram, Buzzing with Miss B. And I love your reels; they are hilarious.
Oh,
and they are very much about instructional coaching, teaching practices. So friends, if you're looking for more people to grow your professional learning family, your professional learning network, definitely check out Buzzing with Miss B. We'll put all the stuff in the show notes so you can find Chrissy over there on Instagram as well. So Chrissy, let's start by talking about student teachers. That's where we're going to have our discussion today. And we know our student teachers are busy lesson planning and designing instruction, providing feedback to students. But today we're going to talk about going beyond the classroom. So let's go ahead and break down some tips that you have for our student teachers in the crowd.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that, in my own experience as a student teacher, and then later as a, they have different names depending on where you are, but as the support teacher, the home teacher, or whatever, the facilitator, I realized over time how we do spend so much time in that one classroom. And just like the teacher does, you get to know the kids and you build relationships and you plan lessons and you do all the good stuff. But after moving beyond, my own role as a teacher into an instructional coaching position and moving even beyond that and working with schools from the outside, I realized that even though that is such a good experience and so necessary and so helpful to prepare you for becoming a teacher, there is so much that you can gain from seeing classrooms beyond the one in which you've been placed.
Yes.
And I feel like every program works differently. Some, student teachers are in a classroom for one semester and a different classroom for another. They're half day, full day. It varies. But no matter how long you are placed in a grade level or a classroom, it is so helpful to move beyond that room and see what is going on in other classrooms at your own school.
Yeah.
Really start to interact with other, teachers and support personnel, because I feel like we see one way of doing things. We see one set of practices that the teacher is using. We see one approach. We see one way of working with kids and building relationships and managing a classroom. But then when we can go down the hallway, even next door or to the grade down the hall, it can open up your world so much to say, oh, there's so many different ways of doing this. And it looks different, and they can be good. More than one way can be good. And I'm going to figure out what my way is.
Chrissy, I love that. And, encouraging our student teachers to go out and observe itinerant teachers or special education teachers, reading therapists or reading specialists, occupational therapists, PT, OT, math coaches, tech coaches, because you never know where your teaching degree can lead you. And you might get really interested, maybe in the STEM coach or something like that, watching them and observing them, because you never know where a best practice might pop up. And you can take that and reflect upon it, implement it in your own classroom. It's so important to see other types of pedagogies, methods, and strategies. So don't just stick to your fourth grade class. Go and observe other practitioners, because you're going to pick up so much information. I think that's fantastic. Classroom management strategies, all sorts of things.
Yes. Once you're a teacher in your classroom, so many times the doors have closed, and now you're in a room by yourself with a bunch of kids and so much to accomplish. And you're going, no matter what your teaching experience is prior to becoming a teacher, it's a lot. And so you're so swamped with just getting through your own day. It can be really hard to go to those other classrooms. When do you have time? When do you have coverage? You're going to give up your PE time that you only have, 40 minutes a day to make your copies and prepare your lessons and do all of the research you need to be amazing. And so we don't have as much time. But as a student teacher, you have more flexibility. So if you can get your eyes into lots of different rooms before you start teaching, and you get stuck in your bubble, which obviously I don't think is a good thing, but it happens.
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity. And obviously, once you start teaching, if you can ask to see your colleagues, do it. Absolutely do it. If there's a coach or a support person who can arrange that for you, it's so worth it. Or even video is great.
It really is. It is.
Yeah. But because once you're a full-time teacher, you are so trapped. And it's so hard to see what goes on beyond your door.
So Chris, you started us off with gold. With tip 1, getting outside your classroom, observing others, taking in those best practice and pedagogies. What's another tip you have for student teachers?
If I think back to how student teachers are present during professional development and PLC meetings, right? We see teachers in a grade level communicating, and we see the student teacher generally sitting, observing, maybe they are paying attention, maybe not so much. It just kind of depends on the nature of the session and how relevant it feels to you at the time. My advice in those settings is to really pay close attention to what's going on, make some notes, and try to figure out, what can I get from this experience? And ask the right questions of your practitioner teacher afterwards. After you leave that setting and you say, okay, well, they were talking about data today, and they use these acronyms, and they use this, and they were talking about some assessment. Afterwards, go back to that teacher and say, okay, you were talking about this test that you gave, right? You gave it on a Wednesday. I wasn't here on Wednesday. What did that look like? Why do you give it? How often does it happen? What is it for? What kinds of information do you get? What do you do with the information? Ask the questions, keep digging, because that teacher probably doesn't even realize how much went on in that meeting, because after a while it becomes sort of standard practice.
Yes.
But you can really, if you ask the right questions, you can really dig into what is the value of what you're doing here. So you can start thinking about, okay, how am I going to do these things? How can I use this as a teacher, or even as a student teacher, in the work that I'm doing with kids? So many times we have data meetings and teachers walk away with not as much as we would like, right? They leave and they don't have plans, they're not really prepared to use that information in a meaningful way. But if you can start building your own practice in your brain of, okay, well, how would I use this? Even if you end up at a school where maybe there's not a ton of support for PLCs, then you at least have an idea of where to start. And you're not just like dependent on somebody to say, this is what we're doing today, and this is how you can use it.
I would also recommend when you're in these data meetings or any professional development and you hear an acronym or a word that you don't know, look it up, research it. If they're mentioning a book, add it to your Amazon cart. If they're mentioning resources, create a little Wakelet or a Padlet so you can go back to it later because you think you're going to remember, but you might not. So go ahead, document your learning. This is also something great that you can put into a digital portfolio of professional development, professional responsibilities that you can then showcase to an employer. So always keep learning and keep those opportunities for learning open to you. Research stuff you don't know, document what you've learned, maybe take a little picture with the speaker and pop that into your portfolio. I think that's fantastic. Thank you, Chrissy, for the professional development piece also as a student teacher. Because as teachers, one thing we get to keep doing is we get to keep on learning and growing. And that's such an exciting part of being an educator. What are the tips you have for us today?
You just kind of mentioned professional development, and I think that's a really good opportunity that student teachers have. So sometimes fourth grade, maybe you're a student teacher in fourth grade, like you mentioned earlier, and they're going to go to a writing, training of some sort of grammar, hands-on experience or something. Sometimes student teachers can go. Sometimes you just have to ask.
Yeah.
You have to just let them know. Sometimes if it's somebody that's coming to the school, you may be able to just slip right in there. It won't be any trouble. Sometimes it might be helpful for you to say, okay, well, I'm going to be certified. Let's say your state certifies teachers first grade through sixth grade. And I'm in a second grade classroom and I have no experience working with upper elementary students, but I know I'm certified for that. And if a job comes my way, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
So you might want to, if upper elementary has some workshops coming up on some sort of topic in math, and maybe that's not your strong suit, you might say, would I be able to participate in that fifth grade workshop? Because I know that that's not like my focus here right now, but as a professional, I want to be well-rounded and I would love to have access to that information.
I love that. And I think that just goes into advocating for yourself, advocating to always be a learner. That's fantastic. Thank you. And it's okay to ask to go to professional development opportunities with your mentor, your co-op teacher, and just make the most of those opportunities. I remember as a student teacher, I went to a math conference. I was not certified in math, but I was certified pre-K to 4, and it was a elementary type math conference. And we got all kinds of stuff for our classrooms, strategies to take away. It was a long day of learning, and I was tired afterwards. But you know what? I got a lot of great information, and you get to connect with other teachers. That could also be helpful when you're job searching.
And, it doesn't hurt to communicate. You can communicate first with your mentor teacher. And then if they say, well, let's talk to the principal about it, that does not hurt for the principal to see that you are interested in learning. Because if they have an opening, they will remember you. And if they don't have an opening, but you are looking for a recommendation to go apply somewhere else, then they can remember that as well and say, oh, well, this person always was interested in learning more, even when it wasn't required.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's such a great little tidbit. See, this is good. This is fantastic. All right, Chrissy, what else do we have for today?
My last thought is really thinking about the support staff that you have on your campus. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, reading specialists, speech pathologists. Yes, math coach. There are so many different positions on a campus, that many of those people didn't know that's where they were going to end up either. I didn't know I was going to end up as a literacy coach. I loved the idea eventually, but it happened a lot sooner than I expected. And so those people may have some interesting perspective for you because they see the school as a whole and they see how things align and how things move up. So, I think it's great to talk to them in general about education and kind of reach out to them about any tips that they have for you. But I think it's also really great to say, okay, is there anything that you do to support student teachers? Because I know as a literacy coach, one year we had a good handful of student teachers. So I actually created like little sessions for them. And so it was just kind of to help them learn some of the practices and that we had on our campus and learn ways that they could actually support students in their own classroom, whether they were, actually instructing the whole class or working with small groups because we did a lot of small group. So, that might be something to ask about and say, I wonder if there's anything that I would love to learn from you. And if there's any way that you could support me out, anything that you would share with me would be great. Because I think that people get really caught up in the role that they have. But if we can support student teachers, then we're supporting the next generation of teachers. And the more prepared those teachers are, the better we have to choose from when we go to hire.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah. So it's a great place to get information at just with the staff that you already have on your campus.
Yeah. And building that professional learning network with the people on your campus, and then bust that out globally through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and keep building those connections. Chrissy, this has been an amazing episode. It's a shorty and I love it because it's so jam-packed with things that student teachers can do Monday or Tuesday, the next day that they listen to this episode. They can go and observe another support person. They can check out other classrooms to see different pedagogies. They can look to see what professional development is being offered by the school or the district and try to see what else they can learn about. I encourage you, if you're a student teacher, to reflect on the goals that you have for yourself during this experience. Where are your glow areas? Where are your grow areas? How are you going to help support yourself to learn more about those grow areas? Maybe there's a PD coming up in your school. Chrissy, before we end our conversation today, can you please share where our listeners can find you and reach out?
Yeah, pretty much I'm buzzing with Miss B everywhere. That's buzzing like a bee does with Miss and then the letter B. So you can find me on, Instagram. I'm rarely on Twitter, but you could find me on Twitter, Facebook. My website is buzzingwithmissb.com. And then my podcast, in case you're interested in instructional coaching, ever moving in that direction, you can check it out. It's Buzzing with Miss B, the coaching podcast.
Fantastic. So wherever you subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to Buzzing with Miss B as well. All right, friends. Thank you so much for listening to our episode today. I know you got a lot out of it, so I'd love to hear what you have to say over on Instagram. You can tag us. I'll put the links down in the show notes. You can find us over on Instagram. And remember, you have the edgy magic within you. Bye for now.
And there you have it, Edu-Magicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more Edu Magic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the Edu Magic within you.